Have you ever stood on a mountaintop, breathless from the climb, only to realize the silence up there feels heavier than the noise you left behind? That silence, that stillness, that moment after your so-called spiritual awakening, why does it not fill you with joy and purpose, but instead leaves you empty and unmotivated? Why, after glimpsing something greater, do you feel smaller than ever? Let me tell you something that may challenge your expectations. The reason you have no motivation after a spiritual awakening is because the illusion that once drove you has been shattered. Before the awakening, your actions were fueled by desires, desire to succeed, to be loved, to be respected, to conquer, to accumulate. But now, having touched the vast stillness within yourself, you realize that all those desires were just echoes in an empty cave. You see through the illusion of the world, and that clarity, while liberating, is also disorienting. The flame that once burned so brightly within you was never purpose, it was craving, and now that craving is gone, leaving behind not peace, but a confusing kind of nothingness. It is in this moment that many give up. They say, I feel no fire, no ambition, no reason to move forward. Something is wrong with me. No, nothing is wrong. Something is finally right, but you do not yet know how to walk in this new reality. Awakening is not the end, it is the beginning of a new kind of discipline, a discipline not rooted in chasing, but in aligning. You must now learn to act not from ego, but from clarity. You must learn to do without needing to become. You must discover that movement without attachment is not meaningless, it is freedom. So when you say, I have no motivation, ask yourself, were you looking for the same motivation that once came from ignorance? Because that motivation is gone, and it must be gone, you must now forge a new way of being, one where motivation is not emotional, not reactive, not ego-driven. It is not the wild fire that consumes, it is the steady flame that illuminates. This is a quiet, humble path. It is no longer about how far you go, but how deeply you walk. You will now train not your ambition, but your presence. You will now focus not on the noise of the world, but on the stillness inside you. To those who feel numb after awakening, remember, winter is not death, it is preparation. When the old you falls silent, the new you is not broken, it is waiting. So rise, not with the old fire of wanting, but with the steady breath of knowing. Be patient with this season. Be gentle with yourself and walk forward, not with urgency but with awareness. That is true motivation after awakening. That is the way. The first key point reveals a deeply misunderstood aspect of spiritual transformation. When the ego-driven desires that once shaped a person's life begin to dissolve, the mind is left standing in an unfamiliar territory of silence and space, and this can be terrifying. Before awakening, people are moved to action by the constant voice of craving within, the desire to become successful, to be seen and acknowledged, to win affection, to outshine others, or to escape pain and discomfort. These motives, while often unconscious, give a person their sense of direction. They wake up with urgency not because they are at peace, but because they are afraid to fall behind, to be forgotten, or to be unloved. However, when spiritual awakening occurs, whether gradually or suddenly, it often tears away these illusions and reveals them to be empty constructions of the mind. What follows is not immediate peace, but rather a confronting emptiness. The individual suddenly realizes that the carrot they have been chasing their whole life was an illusion. The chase was the only thing keeping them moving, and now that it's gone, they feel paralyzed. This leads to a painful conclusion. They were not truly motivated. They were desperate, and desperation is not sustainable. When that desperation ends, what remains is a kind of spiritual vertigo. You are no longer who you were, but you also don't know what you are becoming. You have stepped away from the illusions of external validation, but you have not yet grown into the grounded stillness of internal wisdom. And so you call it lack of motivation. But in truth, it is the death of false fire, a fire that burned fast, but not clean. It is the collapse of a self built on illusion, and until something real emerges from within, the body, mind, and spirit will feel as if they are suspended in air, weightless and without gravity. This stage is not a failure, it is a sacred pause. But most people panic here and try to reattach to the old cravings. Few are brave enough to remain still and let something deeper rise. The second key point addresses the immense shift that occurs in a person's inner compass when they finally gain clarity. Most motivation in the world stems from confusion about who we are, what matters, and what will bring fulfillment. We move through life acting on inherited beliefs, cultural programming, and emotional wounds. We chase careers, relationships, titles, pleasures, and possessions, thinking they will complete us. But awakening brings a blinding light of truth that exposes how much of that pursuit was based on fear, avoidance, and illusion. This realization is powerful, but also destabilizing. The mind, having operated for years under the guidance of reactive ambition, now finds itself without a clear set of instructions. Clarity disrupts what we think we need. It burns away stories we have told ourselves, and like a fire that sweeps through a forest, it leaves behind a landscape that is stripped but fertile. Unfortunately, because we are so addicted to movement and productivity, we mistake this clearing for emptiness rather than opportunity. Instead of trusting the new inner space that has opened up, we panic and look backward, longing for the drive that used to come from wanting to prove ourselves or escape our fears. But the old engine no longer works. The person who used to be driven by insecurity and comparison is gone, and with them their motivations. Now, in the place of that old noise, there is silence, and silence is difficult to interpret when we are used to living in the roar of self, doubt, and external influence. It takes great wisdom to realize that the absence of previous motivation is not the end of the path. It is the beginning of a new, far more conscious one. But we must learn how to listen again, not to the mind, but to the heart of awareness itself. In the third key point, we begin to understand a common misunderstanding on the spiritual path, that awakening is the end goal. This belief is deeply flawed. Awakening is not the conclusion, it is the threshold. It is the point where the old you dies, and the raw, unformed essence of your deeper being begins to rise. But this essence is not mature. It is like a seed that has broken through the soil. It contains infinite potential, but it requires nourishment, discipline, and patience. Too many seekers think that once they have had a spiritual realization, all their suffering will end and clarity will lead to automatic action. But realization is only the door. What lies beyond it is the path of conscious embodiment. Now, with the illusion stripped away, you must learn how to walk again, not through old programming, but through presence. This takes training, humility, and consistency. The warrior who has seen the truth must now learn to live it in every step, breath, and choice. You are no longer reacting, you are responding, you are no longer grasping, you are allowing. But this transition is not easy because the ego is clever and will try to reclaim its throne by disguising old desires in spiritual language. You may find yourself longing for progress, for mastery, even for recognition in spiritual circles. But the path after awakening is not about becoming someone, it is about dissolving into what is. It is about learning to be useful without seeking validation, to act without clinging to outcomes, to move with the flow of Tao rather than the winds of ego. It is the beginning of true training, and for this training, you must be ready to start as a beginner again, even after awakening. The fourth key point explores a higher dimension of motivation, a kind that is not born from lack, but from presence. Before awakening, motivation is almost always compensatory. It compensates for pain, insecurity, comparison, fear, or longing. But after awakening, you see through the game. You realize that the very chase for fulfillment is what prevents you from feeling fulfilled. Now, a deeper kind of movement must emerge, one that comes not from what is missing, but from what is already whole. This is difficult because we are conditioned to believe that strong emotion equals strong motivation, but spiritual action is not driven by emotion, it is driven by alignment. You no longer act to gain something, you act because it is the right action in the right moment from the right state of being. This kind of motivation is like a river. It flows steadily, not explosively. It is not noisy, but it is unstoppable. It comes from connection to something larger than the self, a commitment to serve, to express, to embody truth, to contribute beauty, harmony, or clarity to the world around you. It is not about getting somewhere. It is about fully arriving in what you do. Each task becomes sacred, each gesture intentional. You no longer need to be praised to feel valuable, nor do you need to achieve to feel worthy. You are no longer trying to fix yourself or prove your significance. You are simply honoring the life that flows through you without clinging to identity. This is the essence of true, awakened motivation, purpose without pressure, devotion without drama. The fifth key point reframes one of the most uncomfortable phases after awakening, the stillness that many mistake for lifelessness. When the inner noise of ego quiets, what is left behind is an expansive silence. This silence can feel empty at first because we are addicted to stimulation, but this stillness is not the absence of life. It is the fertile space in which true life begins to take root. Like winter, which looks barren but is quietly preparing for spring, this silence is full of invisible growth. The soil of your being is being turned over. The old roots are being broken down, and the nutrients of past experiences are being returned to your inner earth. But if you judge this period as a failure or a block, you miss the deeper invitation. You are being asked to sit with yourself, not to fix, change, or perform, but to truly be. This is where patience becomes your greatest ally. Do not rush to fill the silence with noise. Let the silence speak to you. Let it reveal what is real. Let it cleanse your perception so that when movement returns, it is not reactive, but intentional. This is a time to observe, to integrate, to surrender to the deeper rhythms of life. Just as nature does not bloom all year round, your spirit, too, must go through seasons. Honor the season you are in. Trust that in the stillness, something profound is taking shape, beyond the grasp of the mind. The sixth and final key point reminds us that this new phase of life after awakening cannot be approached with the same urgency, ambition, or expectation as before. It requires a new set of virtues, patience, discipline, humility, and presence. The path forward is no longer a sprint, it is a conscious walk. Every step must be rooted in awareness. Every action must come from clarity, not compulsion. You must train yourself to act without attachment, to serve without seeking reward, and to show up without needing recognition. This is the discipline of the awakened path, not a discipline of harshness, but of sacred responsibility. You are no longer living for the ego's pleasure. You are living to align with the truth of your nature. This requires humility because the ego will constantly try to reassert itself. It will whisper that you are not doing enough, not achieving fast enough, not being seen enough. But you must return again and again to the simplicity of the present moment. Let your breath anchor you, let your intention purify your action, let your presence become the offering, and when you stumble as you will, do not judge, return, begin again. This is not the discipline of perfection. It is the discipline of return. Over time, this steady practice transforms your inner landscape. The fog clears, the strength returns, and a new kind of motivation arises, not loud or dramatic, but deep, unwavering, and wise. This is the motivation of one who walks the path, not to arrive, but to honor every step of the way. This is the quiet power that sustains true transformation.